Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Bike Shed, a weekly podcast from your friends at thoughtbot about developing great software. I'm Sally Hall.
And I'm Aji Slater. And together we're here to share a bit of what we learned along the way.
So, Aji, what's new in your world?
Um, I am rapidly approaching my move to Scotland.
Ooh,
And
yeah.
that is taking up all free brain bandwidth that I have to spare. We have a lot of tasks to tick off, a lot of them related with selling our place here in Chicago. But also, just as you walk around in the world, you realize, oh, that needs to be handled somehow by someone. And the list just kind of keeps growing. But I'm super excited. I'm really looking forward to the change, the trip, getting to kind of reestablish in a new place and learn how to fit in or not fit in as I do in that new world. And I'm kind of excited to see how the dogs will react
Oh,
because
yeah.
we're bringing our two little fur babies, and I think
Do
I
they
think
have
the
to be
older
quarantined at all?
they don't have to be quarantined because, well, it all starts as many things do, that if you have money, the rules don't apply to you. And
Mm-hmm.
so private flights don't have to be quarantined and aren't subject to the same sort of regulations. You still have to have like rigorous health paperwork and things like that, but there are some things that you don't have to do. And so there are a few companies that have caught on to this and made flights that are like pooling together people to split the cost. So it's an extremely exorbitant amount of money for one flight from New Jersey to London, but worth it because I don't have to put my little babies in cargo or quarantine, especially one of them's an older fella. I just don't
Yeah.
want to be away from him for potentially up to 6 months. I'm not sure what it is right now.
Yeah. Well, that is gross but convenient. That's a side channel that you get to use. I'm glad you get to have your pups with you the whole time. That'll be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm imagining how much must be going on in your brain with an international move. We moved about a year and a half ago, literally just to the other side of the medium sized city we live in, and it was overwhelming and exhausting. So, fingers crossed that it all goes smoothly.
Thanks.
And
Thanks so much.
I'm really jealous you're spending the holidays in Scotland because movies make that seem delightful.
Yeah, I can't wait. I will
Yeah.
we'll see how many film sets there are near our house every week.
Yeah, nice.
What's new in your world?
Um, yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about this. We've got the app I'm working on has a React front end and a Rails back end, and we're using Inertia to connect the two, um, which means we're uh, doing a lot of serializing data.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of interconnected stuff. And we're using Bullet to identify opportunities for eager loading
Sure.
or places where we are unnecessarily eager loading. Um, and somehow we started with a pattern of doing eager loading in the serializers. Um,
Hmm.
so we're using Blueprinter, which I find really easy to use, and it's really straightforward to, throw an includes in there and get all your extra stuff loaded for free.
Nice.
Um, but we've discovered that because serializers are used reused more often, that it means that, for various controller actions, we are either eager loading too much or not enough. And Bullet is very yelly about this. Um, and, Bullet yelling in development means potentially users yelling in production. So we should listen to it. So we're working on figuring out, a strategy for migrating the eager loading from serializers to controllers. And it's one of those balances of like, we've got a thing that feels like a little refactor, but we've also got more feature work to do and a deadline coming up, and like, how do we balance those, and do we just kind of sneak this into other tickets, or advocate for a whole ticket for doing this, or is this going to be a fast follow after the release? Um, so I've been thinking about that a lot.
It sounds like maybe you haven't come to the decision of which one to kind of advocate for, but what are the things that you're looking at that would help you decide?
I guess, is this something that like is going to get worse if we don't do the refactoring right now? Like, are
Mm,
we going to be adding more blueprints that we're eager loading in and making the problem bigger by putting it off? Which I think we're probably not. I think our blueprints are pretty set the way they are right now. Um, but if we were, that would be, I think, a good reason to take a moment and refactor it now, so we can
hmm.
rewrite the pattern before we keep copying it.
Right.
Before we keep repeating the pattern. I think another thing to think about is how much other work is left to be done before our urgent deadline, which I think is the end of the month. Yeah. And like how much of that is, we've sort of accidentally gotten ourselves into a bit of a situation where like tasks are blocking other tasks in ways that like make
Mm,
it hard to parallelize work.
hmm.
So I think if I get to a point where there's not like a available piece of work to do because it's dependent on other in-flight stuff,
Hmm.
I'll try to see if we can slip it in there. Um, I say slip it in there as though I'm gonna like sneak off and do this. I will
Of
talk to the product manager. I will add it to the backlog like a responsible grown up should. But
course.
it's so tempting to be like, what if I just make this PR when nobody's looking?
That's a
Yeah.
really great way to make use of that kind of that time that might otherwise be idle when you have those dependent tickets to do
Mm-hmm.
the kind of refactoring, shoring up that stuff that maybe isn't as vital as the other things that need to be met for the deadline, but should be a quick follow on or something like that to kind of bring them back before the deadline. Um,
Yeah.
so sometimes, depending on the situation, because of course the answer is always it depends, uh, those dependent work streams can kind of work in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also nice when sometimes you just need a brain break. You've been working on the same kind of things
Mm,
for a while, and it's like, oh, here's another ticket that's not exactly the same as what I just did, but close enough that it does not feel fun, um, or engaging. And so it's nice to have a little backlog of those other things so you can, hop over there and switch brain gears for a while and
yeah,
be refreshed when you come back.
yeah, I like those, especially if they're self-contained, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're one off. They don't kind of require other work or bleed into another ticket or something like that. It's good to have those like snacky kind of tickets that you can just take, close out, feel the accomplishment of closing a loop, and then move on. Yeah, love it.
Yeah, I like the phrase snacky. Thinking of those as little snack tickets is, I think, a great mindset for that. And that's how I treat them.
Nice. I used to do something just kind of uh, way that I like to work when it was available on a project that I was on for a long time of Bug Fix Friday, and
Mm-hmm.
make Bug Fix Friday just picking up those kinds of tickets and like see how many that I could get to in one day and just kind of clear out that cruft in the backlog. So yeah, those can be a really sort of exciting diversion that is actually still getting stuff done.
Yeah. And I find that sometimes it's, those little bug tickets or little refactor improvements are a good chance to sort of visit areas of the app that you haven't spent much time in.
Yeah,
It's like a little day trip over into the admin side of the portal or whatever.
nice. Well, speaking of visiting places that you haven't spent much time in before,
Ooh.
we are now back home from the Thoughtbot Summit in Amsterdam. And we had the opportunity to work with other Thoughtbotters in the same physical space, which is not something that we get to do very often in this remote first world. Do you have any thoughts, feelings, memories about that time working with other Thoughtbotters up close?
Yeah, it's nice. I don't know. I think I really love working remote, which is not a thing that I felt 5 years ago when we went fully remote, but now
Mm,
it feels like the right context for me. But it's also really fun. I don't know, kind of the same idea as like a little. snack ticket. It's fun to every once in a while get to sit next to another person and look at their screen without having to do the 700 steps of sharing it on Zoom or whatever. Um, and uh, I managed to get some good work done on my little side project, that scheduling gem I've mentioned that
Hmm.
I'm hoping to have out soon. Um, and I'm not sure, if the extra progress I made was because of other people's input or just because of like my brain working differently when I'm in a room with other humans who are doing work,
Hmm.
but it was productive.
Yeah, I really resonate with that idea of it being kind of a different mode of working. You have a different energy. It's just a change from the routine, as well as any kind of logistical one-on-one benefits of being nearby somebody.
Yeah.
The first consultancy I worked at was we paired 100% of the time, two keyboards, one computer, constantly, and that was just essentially the only way that we worked. And so the shift from that to fully remote during lockdown was a pretty monumental shift for me at the time. And so I found it hard to find ways to kind of recapture that energy a lot. I think
Hmm.
for something exactly like you were saying, is that something that would be as simple as just turning your head slightly to look at the person that you're working with uh, becomes 16 clicks to operate something in a Zoom call.
Yeah.
And that lack of friction, I think, is a large part of what makes it a little more difficult for me to, or maybe a little more energy taxing to pair remotely as opposed to being in person.
Yeah. I think there's something about video calls that I'm sure that there is, tons of writing on this or TikToks on this or whatever. But there's something about video calls that I find more draining than
Mm,
interacting with people. And like, I'm a major introvert and my brain is very weird. So I find a lot of social interaction draining, but I feel like it's rewarding in person in ways that it can't be on video,
hmm.
which isn't to say I don't appreciate or enjoy video calls at all. I just, the idea of pairing all day in person sounds fine to me, but the idea of pairing all day remotely on a video call makes me want to curl up under my desk. And I can't explain that, but it feels different.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I'm definitely not recharged by social interaction. Not to say that I don't enjoy it often, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's not the way that my batteries work. So I think I'm pretty similar to you in that regard.
Another thing that I think is super valuable about gathering in person with a remote team, like the working together is amazing, but I think it's also really valuable to just, have a meal with someone or sit down and talk to someone in person about nothing or your life or whatever, or the cool duck you just saw, and form a connection that I think then makes it easier to reconnect online.
Hmm.
Once
Hmm.
I've had even a 30-minute conversation with someone, the remote conversations with that person feel fuller or richer in some way.
Yeah.
It feels more like I'm talking to a person rather than a colleague or a computer or, you know,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
find I'm
There's
more likely to reach out and ask for help from someone that I've spent time with in person.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of research around the couple of minutes of small talk before meetings, that getting to know your team a little bit on the like person to person level, that makes collaborating easier and more effective. Um, and that's why I always try to advocate for that whenever anyone starts to say like we're wasting the first 2 minutes of whatever, or the 90 seconds before, and it's like we're actually putting those to use.
Yeah.
But you get a 10x, I hate myself for using that, but a 10x return on that kind of camaraderie and relationship building when you're in person. So it's
Yeah.
definitely worth from time to time if you can make it happen.
Yeah. It's also, I don't know, heartwarming to spend time around people on our team and remember how much I like everybody. It's so weird, honestly, to be at a company where like I can genuinely say I like everyone.
Yeah.
Like that's a thing that I've noticed about thoughtbot for me, is that almost every other company I've been at, there's always been at least one, often many more, uh, person that I really don't want to end up sitting next to in a meeting,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
or like paired up with to work on something. And that has not been my experience at thoughtbot, which is, I always come home feeling kind of warm and fuzzy about the
Yeah.
people who choose to work together this way.
Yeah. That is statistically unlikely, isn't it?
It is.
There must be something more going on there. Maybe we'll have to recircle back to that and figure out what it is about the culture, the thoughtbot special sauce here. But I do seem to have the same um, feeling of working with anybody. They're all no skips. The
Yeah.
the whole the whole list here, and
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to work too directly on a specific project with anyone at the summit because what I was focused on was my talk for Open Summit, which is
Oh,
kind of an
yeah.
individual work stream. But I was really buoyed by just the presence of other people being in the room. There was one of the workspaces that got very, very quiet for a period of time, and we all started slacking each other about how quiet it is and shushing each other on Slack while like looking sideways at everyone else who is in the same physical space. And yeah, that shared moment, that the joke, the playfulness, big on play. Uh, really added to the kind of bonding, and I think, like you're saying, it sets up some easier paths to interaction and to relating to these people when they're back to being flat images on my monitor.
Yeah. Somebody did note while we were all working together in a fairly quiet room, somebody posted something on Slack that was funny. And it's just a nice difference to hear people laughing out loud around you,
Mm,
as opposed to just seeing the little emoji reactions pop up. Um, and so it's fun to sort of blend that in person and online interactions at the same time, for sure.
yeah. One of our coworkers mentioned that she loves seeing people's faces and being able to tell when they just read a message that she sent.
Yeah.
And I took some time after she had mentioned that to like watch that happen between different groups of people in the room, and yeah, it was very, very heartwarming, and it makes it easier for me to picture that they will be pleased, or at the very least not upset with me if I reach out and be like, hey, can you help me with this thing real quick, or
Yeah.
yeah, again, just an easier on ramp to better collaboration.
Yeah, totally. I think globally there have been lots of efforts to bring that online in various ways over the past 5 years. And I feel like recently I've experienced some that are like really effective. Um, and I think one of the most effective online things that feels similar to gathering in person, as far as like relationship building and just connecting with people, is just playing like a collaborative game online. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't even have to be a terribly interesting one, you know? But it's like low stakes, something to do. And if we all have, at least our mics on, or ideally mics and cameras on, then we get all the, little spontaneous interactions too, without the pressure of like, am I contributing something valuable to the important conversation happening in this meeting?
Yeah,
Because if nobody's contributing anything valuable and the purpose is not to contribute something valuable, then it doesn't matter. Just talk.
right. Yeah, that's really interesting. The idea of the stakes of any particular interaction because of how much effort, maybe little e effort, it takes to start a tuple call or a Google Meet or whatever. And the totality of focus that it takes up, or at least the larger chunk of someone's focus that it takes up, it makes it feel like you have to do well at communicating, which currently I am not. But
I talk
to
good. It's fine.
yeah, like you're saying that what you contribute, you might hold back because it's not quote unquote of value, but explicitly setting the stakes to be lower allows you to do that and join in and is more inviting and kind of welcoming. So I too like those games or those opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I find hard about connecting with people online via video calls is the little timer, which isn't, not all platforms have it, but, seeing a little thing at the top of the screen count up how long you've been on the call
Mm-hmm.
can sometimes feel like, I don't know, I've heard of really toxic CEOs or whatever in the past having like a little automated calculator that shows how much money a meeting is costing by like basically
Oof.
taking everyone in the room's salaries and like, dividing that down to the minute, and then every minute it goes up
Yikes.
as a way to pressure people into like being more efficient in a meeting, which is terrible. And I've heard of it, but I've never experienced it. Maybe it's a urban legend.
Right.
But sometimes the little counter on a video call can feel that way to me, especially when we, veer into less directly work related conversation. The
Mm-hmm.
stuff that like, my brain knows is useful. Like you said, there is value in like connecting with people before a meeting or like in the middle of a conversation or something. But my eyes see the little numbers going
Mm.
and feel like, is this, am I wasting time? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's a number there measuring what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that no one brings a giant timer to dinners when we're on at Summit together.
Yeah, the only clock we're on then is for when the restaurant wants to close.
Yeah, that's fair. We do shut down a restaurant.
I yeah, I appreciate the sentiment of the clock in the meeting to keep things on task and keep things relevant and not kind of sprawling. It's very easy for someone when there's just one microphone on to just keep talking, even they might not feel like they need to, but they just are.
Hmm.
But yeah, the execution of that feels it's like it missed a few things.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are other good ways to keep meetings focused and on task that don't involve a big threatening uh, dollar sign count up or countdown or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Are there techniques or things that you do to make remote meetings more effective or to, yeah, you make your time online with someone work more smoothly?
Yeah, I when I first started at thoughtbot, I paired with this amazing person, Sarah. Shout out Sarah, miss you. I just realized that there are like 100 Sarahs at thoughtbot, so that doesn't count. You're all amazing. I miss you all. Um and she had really good frameworks for being really explicit about a pairing session or a video call or something like this, which is like at the beginning just be explicit about like what is our goal for this, um, what is our time frame for this, right? And I feel like there was a third one, but I can't remember it. But I find that like jumping on a call that is open ended and vague
Hmm.
can be daunting and
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming, and you can end up getting off the call and feeling like you actually have more questions than when you started.
Mm-hmm.
um, I also, and I think this is similar to something we talked about before when we were talking about ADHD, I find it really useful to have a time frame in my head
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, we're going to pair for 45 minutes and then we're going to take a break and we're going to reassess whether we want to continue pairing or whether we want to work independently.
Right.
And just knowing that that end of time is coming is both helpful for motivating, like, hey, let's see what we can get done in these last 10 minutes before we take a break, and also helpful as a little escape hatch if my brain is just not doing it and it's just taking 4 times the effort than it would normally take to be on the call, but I know that it's still valuable. Knowing like, okay, in 15 minutes, I have a break
Hmm.
can help me push through. Um, and like with meetings, I think an agenda is a non optional part of a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
especially a part of a meeting invite. And it doesn't have to be long or formal, right? It can be just a sentence.
Right.
But if you invite me to a meeting with no purpose in the invitation, I'm going to be, best case, a little annoyed, worst case, terrified. You know? Or like not really as excited about it.
Yeah. Not maybe showing up in the right way, or like not knowing what hat you need to wear
Right.
to be there, right? Like what is our goal? And if you come in with the engineering hat and you actually need the product hat, then it's going to take you a second to kind of switch over. There might be some miscommunication, like crossing over before you realize what page that each of you is on. Yeah, so just sort of removing some of that, some of those questions beforehand, can be super helpful. And maybe some of that might happen faster if it's a meeting in person, because you can pick up on body language, what notebooks and what things did they bring to the room. You can figure out someone's demeanor a lot faster as you're kind of assembling around a table, to talk, than you can online. And so having those answered beforehand can be a huge time saver, energy saver, and just keep everything running along.
Yeah. Yeah. And chit chatting slash catching up, whatever, hanging out, um, is a valid meeting agenda.
Yeah, true.
But it's helpful to know that ahead of time so I can
Yeah.
know to bring my fun hat. What's hardest for you about working remotely?
Ooh, what's
Like we've been
hardest?
doing it for a while. I think we've all come up with some systems and things, but like what is still a friction point for you? Or are
I
you a
th-
perfect remote worker who needs nothing?
oh my no. um I think there's a lot of nuance that gets lost, or a lot of like subtlety, a lot of like small things that can in aggregate turn into something kind of important, that are, again, it's because of the effort required. There's something that you might just like throw offhanded in a meeting, or just some comment that you might make, or you might think to walk past somebody's desk and uh, say, what are you working on? It's like, oh, I think I'm working on the same thing. Should we be working on this together, or are we doing the same work? Just those little kind of uh, serendipity moments that are much easier to happen when you're co-located. And I haven't found a great way to recreate any of that remotely, but I find that there is a requirement of more intention about like communication, and maybe bringing up some of those things that don't feel like they're valuable enough to make a meeting or something. Maybe pop that into Slack, and then people can respond to it. And if no one does, that's great. It was low cost, right? But
Yeah.
there still is a greater cost involved to all of those. And when it's me feeling that and doing that, and it's also everyone else on the team feeling that and doing that, it turns into kind of a missed part of the work that you have to, instead of allowing to happen naturally, you have to create it kind of whole cloth.
I think for me the biggest friction is that I'm late to everything all the time because well, there's a lot of reasons, but um, I definitely found that when working in person, if we have a meeting that multiple or everyone in the room is in, I will notice when people start to get up and move towards where the meeting is, and that helps
Mm-hmm.
me realize, oh, it's time for a meeting. Um, Whereas everybody else could be waiting in the Zoom, and if I didn't see the one of the many notifications I have going off letting me know, I'm not going to make it.
Right.
Yeah.
I've found things like GatherTown, or these apps that recreate an office in sort of a virtual space so you can see where people quote unquote are.
Hmm.
Um, Very interesting, but I don't think any of them have really hit it yet. it's adding a layer of complexity rather than what actually we need to have happen is a layer of complexity be removed.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I feel like when we're in person, if you are looking at me, I can see you are looking at me.
Yes.
And I can, stop picking my nose or smile at you or respond in some way. Whereas, like, my brain is a little weirded out by being in something like GatherTown or on
Yeah.
like a big virtual call and my camera's on and maybe everybody's looking at me, maybe nobody's looking at me.
Mm,
Um, but it's just like kind of weird to be feeling like heavily perceived and also not perceived at all at the same time.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I find I rely on the little green dot in Slack to see if I'm about to reach out to somebody and their green dot is not on. I might not tag them in a message, or I might try to save something for later. And I might be over indexing on that green dot because it's not a very good indicator because there are so many things that can make it a false positive or false negative. You can even tell Slack to just keep your dot open. So
Mm-hmm.
you could be diligently awaiting my message, but without the green dot, I might think twice about it. And so activity indicators also still not quite it. Helpful, but not quite it.
Yeah. I'm just very bad at keeping those up to date myself.
Mm.
I turned, I manually set my Slack to away at some point for something, um, and forgot to set it back, and was basically just like looked like I wasn't on Slack for like 4 days before I figured it out.
I have had many an accidental whole rest of the day lunch breaks just because I have forgotten to take the little and I know you can set it to go off after an hour, but that feels like, what if that's wrong? I'm not going to use that.
Yeah,
I'll remember. I don't remember.
I'll never remember. No, that's not a thing my brain can do. Yeah.
Something that we learned at Dev Bootcamp when you start a pairing session is they were very explicit about checking in. Like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Like, what kind of role would you want to play in this today? What are you feeling? Are you feeling really like energized to be on the keyboard? Do you want to be the navigator? Like, that big divide is pretty easy to talk about, but also just like, how are you emotionally? Just a little bit of a check in,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's just audio only, can be super helpful for just kind of setting the level of where you're both at, and maybe you'll shift to meet each other in a third place, and things will be in a great flow, or you can find a flow more easily because you know where the other person's at and how to like interact. So again, that explicitness and that kind of added intentionality I find can be super helpful in a long pairing session or even just a quick one.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of ways to replicate what we like about being in person online, and I think intentionality is like the biggest um, commonality between those. It's like
Yeah.
a lot of things that just happen naturally when we're around each other as humans are things that we have to work hard to recreate when we're doing online stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and some of them I think we've gotten pretty good at, and some of them we're not there yet.
Yeah. I think another thing that we've sort of said in a few different ways, but might be good to intentionally say, is that there should be a place for like low stakes communication. And I don't necessarily mean like a random channel or something like that. Like, those are fun, those are great, keep those. But also a shared awareness of like, this Slack channel is going to be noisy because we're just going to throw our thoughts about what we're working on in there to allow that kind of serendipity to happen. Because if everything feels like it has to be of utmost value, again, you're going to miss those little things. But without the shared understanding that you don't need to see this the second a message comes into this channel, you can ignore this channel for hours at a time. um, can be really frustrating, can be really problematic to different folks. So again, that kind of upfront, be explicit about it, but have a place for low stakes rolling around of ideas, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being explicit about what it is and that you have clear permission to ignore it for hours on end
Hmm.
is an important part of that.
I think we cracked remote work.
Yeah, we fixed it. Everybody's good now. We'll
You're welcome.
work remotely forever and be happy. There's a bonus. You can't catch a cold from a coworker via a video call. I think
This is
quite a
true.
few of us came home with what we've started calling Amsterdamage, the post-summit cold.
Yep. Yep. It always happens. Every time I go to a convention, it happens. A conference, it happens. Summit, it happened. So
Yep.
here we are.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's take that opportunity to wrap it up.